Welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when new videos are available. So today we're going to talk about contingent sales. We haven't had a class on this in, I don't know, 8 months or so. So wanted to bring it back up, and especially since still the majority of the deals that we're going to have to do as a listing agent is going to probably involve us having a seller that is going to become a buyer. And it still is, even for agents that have been doing this for a while, it becomes, it's confusing on how to approach the whole contingent sale, right? So before we get into forms, we're going to just talk a little bit about the process and a little bit about, you know, the verbiage. And so it makes it easier to have the conversations with the clients. So just to break it down for newer agents, and let's get it to the, you know, lowest common denominator of understanding the process. I have someone that wants to sell their home. That person wants to sell their home in order to purchase another home, right? That's a contingent sale. That's what we're talking about. And a lot of times what happens is, for a listing agent, and like I said, this happens to some very experienced agents, instead of dealing with the process of a contingent sale, they try to figure out a way for their seller to be a buyer first, or they focus on the buying side prior to focusing on the selling side. And that's the absolute reverse. They're dependent. Their ability to purchase is dependent on them selling their house. Now, are there going to be times where you have someone that, yes, I want to sell my house and I do have cash besides that, I could go buy it? That's going to happen. That's not going to happen a lot. You're not going to see that a lot. When you go talk to a seller, it's like, I need every penny out of the sales of this house to be able to purchase. And if I don't have that, I'm not going to be able to purchase. And so because agents, we don't have a super strong understanding of the process of a contingent sale, it becomes a scary conversation when we're talking to a seller and we're trying to explain to them how we're going to, you know, guide them through the whole process of them being able to, you know, upgrade their living situation, right? Because it's the majority of them want. There's some people that want to downsize, but people are trying to look for better areas, bigger houses, things like that, right? They're trying to improve, and that's what we sell as part of home ownership, right? Is like, this is not your forever home when you're a first-time home buyer. This is not the home you're going to be in for the rest of your life. Most people live in a house between 6 and 8 years, and then they move on to something else. And we use this as a stepping stone for you to be able to purchase things. So if that's how we're going to sell to first-time home buyers, that's what the process is. If our intent is for them to become our client for life and that they're going to provide us referrals, then we should understand the process when they're ready to, you know, take our advice and improve their living situation, or you know, move to another place that they feel is an improvement or an upgrade to where they're at. Then we need to know how to do that. Okay. So it's really important for us, if we're going to become listing agents, that we understand this process, because you're going to see it a lot, right? So the first thing we have to do when we're having a conversation with a seller about them being, becoming a buyer and making a contingent sale, is treat them as a seller. So many times, I see agents that will have a conversation about, well, I met a seller that they want to sell, but they want to buy. But before we list their house, they want to go get qualified and look at properties. Well, that's fine. I mean, I get the qualification thing, but the problem is that we're treating them as buyers, we're not treating them as sellers. I can go and do my listing presentation, take the listing. In the process of taking the listing, get them qualified for selling it, for them to purchase a house. The thing is that if we go and try to get them qualified before, we're guessing what the value of the property is, because we haven't done our job yet. We haven't gone through the process of doing the listing presentation, of going through what the costs are, how much they owe, what they're going to net, all of that stuff. So it's really important for us as agents to make sure that we're controlling the progress and the process in the deal with a contingent seller. So the first step is they're a seller. Period. End of story. They are a seller. We treat them as a seller. We do the listing presentation. We get them to sign the listing agreement. We put the property on the market. We market it as contingent on them being able to find a property. And I think that's the first stumbling block for most agents, is they think that the sellers are going to be afraid that they're going to be stuck selling their home without finding something else. And that's not how it works. That's the point of the contingency. And again, our understanding of how that contingency works is going to give us the confidence to explain to the seller, this is why this is the process. So I think the biggest mistake that we make as agents in contingent sales is we don't treat them as a regular seller. We treat them as a buyer first, and that gets us into trouble, okay? So we've got to do that first, get that home sold. And once that home is in escrow and contingent on them being a buyer, then we start the process of them being a buyer. Then we start the process of them being the buyer. You could do the qualification process earlier, but you're not going to look at properties. One of the biggest mistakes that we make as agents is after we've done this property, we've got this listing or we're about to get the listing, is we start showing them properties, let them fall in love with homes that they can't buy yet. Now, sometimes it works out and we're able to submit offers. And we're going to talk about what the downfalls of what the pitfalls are of getting your offer accepted on your up leg prior to selling your down leg, right? And so that's part of the verbiage I was talking about. Their down leg is the property that you're going to list. That's the down leg. Their up leg is the property that you're going to help them purchase, right? Their move up. So as I go through these contracts, I'm going to, the forms that we're going to use and we're going to talk about today, I'm going to say down leg, up leg, right? So just so we're kind of set that ahead of time, you know what that is. Down leg is the property you're selling. Up leg is the property you're purchasing. Okay, so before I share my screen and we start talking about the combination of the process and the forms, does anybody have any questions? Just go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question in the chat box. I'll be looking at that. Or if you want to type your question in the chat box, go for it. And I'll be able to see those and help you out. All right. That's the case. Let's start sharing our screen here. All right. So what you should be looking at is the contingency for sale of buyer's property. Let's start with the seller's purchase or replacement property. Let's go this way first. Let's start here, right? Because we're going to focus on them being a seller. And we're going to focus on that first. So this is a form that you're going to help protect your client when they are a contingent seller. When they have to sell their home to purchase another home, this is what is going to be incorporated into your purchase agreements. You're going to do it as part of a counteroffer because you're the one who should be dictating the terms of this seller's purchase of replacement property. So if you're a buyer's agent and you see on the MLS that it says it's contingent on them purchasing a replacement property and closing concurrently and all those things, this form needs to be incorporated, but you can't incorporate it. You could try to send it with your offer if you wanted to, but really those terms are going to be dependent on the seller. The listing agent probably, hopefully, has already done that. And this is what's going to build in the contingency of them finding a replacement property. Just putting in the counteroffer that it's contingent on them finding a replacement property is not enough. And the reason I say that it's not enough is because there is no timelines, there's no clarification on what that contingency means. It just means it's contingent. So I don't have the ability as buyer's agent, if the contingency is taking a long time, to send notices to perform. Maybe it makes it difficult to cancel because of the way we accepted it. So we want this SPRP, that's the name of this form. We want the SPRP to be incorporated into our agreement so that the terms of the contingency of finding a replacement property and closing escrow are clear. Okay, so let's look at it. So obviously this is an addendum to the purchase agreement because that's what it is. It's changing the terms of the purchase agreement. This would be the date of the purchase agreement. Now it's carrying over the date from when we were writing the offer, the last few weeks. So let's say that the purchase agreement is dated, today. right? So our purchase agreement is dated today or yesterday, whatever we want to say. This is the address. The buyer's John Smith. The seller is, Bill Jones, right? Okay, so we got a seller, Bill Jones. Okay, the default of the contract is that it's contingent on them finding a replacement property. Okay, the default time period for that is 17 days. So 17 days from acceptance of the offer, right? Now remember, I'm the listing agent, we're a seller, I'm incorporating this 17 days from the acceptance. So if acceptance is today, then it's 17 days from today, right? So that would put us right at the end of the month to find a replacement property. When I do that, when I remove the finding replacement property, at 17 days, I either remove this contingency or I cancel the agreement, just like with any other contingency. Okay? Seller shall deliver to buyer at time of removal of finding replacement property contingency proof of a replacement property. Either a copy of the contract that's accepted or the escrow number for that purchase, whatever it is. Even if the replacement property is a lease, proof that I leased a property. That's what I have to give them to them. If I don't do that as seller in 17 days, the buyer can send me a notice to seller to perform. And if I don't perform, then the buyer has the right to cancel, or we could negotiate an extension of that finding a replacement property contingency. That's it, right? So the reason we want those days for finding a replacement property is because it gives us an opportunity to, at that point, have a conversation on whether we're going to extend, cancel, right, or remove the contingency. So you've got to determine, is 17 days enough for you to find a replacement property? I know that right now, inventory is short, right? The inventory is not, there's not a lot of homes for sale. I just did statistics that I'm going to present at the sales meeting tomorrow, and everywhere is just slightly over a month worth of inventory in our 5 target market areas, right? So everywhere is under 2 months of inventory right now. So I get that. It's difficult. So this might be what you feel, dependent on where your seller is moving to, how much time you need to find them a replacement property. Probably 30 days to the contingency to give you some time. Now, you don't have to wait the whole 30 days. If you find something in 2 weeks and get your offer accepted, you could remove the contingency at that time. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So you figure out, based on where it is you're going, where your seller is going to move to, is 17 days enough time? If it's not, then you negotiate that time there. Okay? Questions so far about the finding a replacement property? That part of the contingency. Okay, good. Now, if you check B, it means that we've already got an offer accepted, we're already in escrow, and that's fine. Okay, if you do that, if this paragraph is checked, then the time periods in paragraph 2A and the buyer's deposit in 2B, which we'll get to, shall remain as specified in the agreement. There is no change to the terms of the purchase agreement because you're already in escrow. And we'll talk about that in a minute in the time periods. Okay, now the second one that you should be checking also is close of replacement property. Okay, right? How people write it, it's contingent on finding and closing concurrently. So there's no closing concurrently. Doesn't happen. You can't close at the exact same time, right? We all know that. If I close escrow on my down leg, I have to get, the funds have to get transferred to the new escrow and then we close, right? What this is saying is this agreement is contingent on seller's ability to close escrow on replacement property according to that contract. It's their ability to close, not that they're closing, it's their ability to close. What is their proof of their ability to close? They've wired their funds into escrow, they've signed loan docs, they've removed their contingencies. That's it. If it gets to the point where they've already signed loan docs, it's time to remove that. So it says, this is a contingency in favor of seller. Seller, by the scheduled close of escrow date for the replacement property, shall either close escrow or remove this contingency in writing. So that means, like, if it goes past the original close date of the up leg, that's what they're looking at here. It goes past that original close date of the up leg, they have to remove the contingency. I would just say, look, as seller, right, because I have to have this conversation with the listing agent. When we get to the point where we've signed loan docs, it's time to remove this contingency also, the close of replacement contingency. Darwin, go ahead.
Boss, that means that if I representing the buyer in this case, I don't have to remove contingencies during the 17 days until the seller sign loan docs.
We're gonna get no. We're gonna get to the time periods in a moment, Darwin. We haven't discussed that yet, but we're gonna get there. We will get to the time periods for everybody's contingencies now. Okay, so close of replacement property. You want to make that sure that's in there. Here we are. Time periods. The time periods in the agreement for inspections, contingencies, covenants, close of escrow, and other obligations that commence from date of acceptance shall begin the day after seller delivers to buyer a written notice removing the finding replacement contingency specified in paragraph 1A. That's the default of the form. Okay, so what that means is all the time periods in the RPA, if we don't change this, all the time periods in the RPA, their inspection, their appraisal, their investigation, the seller's responsibility to provide reports and disclosures, all of that stuff won't start until the seller removes their contingency of finding replacement property. Okay? Or if we check the box right here, it remains as specified in the agreement. Okay? So here's the thing. Let's say, for example, that we leave it as it is the default, or because remember, if we check this box because we got an offer accepted prior to selling our property, right? We purchased a home before we sold our home, then the time periods, right, for seller will begin prior to the time periods for buyer. Okay, do you guys follow me? If I get my offer accepted and I then sell my home, right, because I get my offer accepted, my time periods are probably, and we'll talk about it in the COP, are probably going to start prior to the buyer on my down leg. My contingencies on my up leg will start prior to. If I don't change this, the time periods from the default of the time periods don't start until I remove the contingency. If I don't change that to they remain the same, then for me as seller, what will happen is this. I find a replacement property. I write my offer. I get my offer accepted. Okay. In order to get my offer accepted on my up leg, my time periods have to start like they normally do in the purchase agreement, right? If I then have to wait 1 day after I remove the appraisal contingent or the finding a replacement property contingency for your time periods to start, I'm at least a day behind you. Okay? I'm at least a day behind you, which means that I may have to remove my contingencies on my up leg prior to you needing to remove your contingencies on the down leg. So there is a danger. There's a danger in allowing it to be the time periods are going to start after the contingency is removed. Now I could see, like Darwin said, as a buyer, well, I don't want to remove any of my contingencies until they remove their contingency of finding a replacement property. Understandable. But their ability to find a replacement property doesn't affect your deposit. Meaning if they have a contingency to find a replacement property, you've gone through and done all your investigations, all your inspections, done the appraisal, you're ready to go. You remove all your contingencies and then they don't find a replacement property. They don't get to keep your deposit. Do you have to pay for an appraisal and inspection? Yes. But that is the cost of being a buyer when you buy real estate, take the contingency of the seller finding a replacement property out of it 100%. If you do an appraisal and say the property doesn't appraise, do you still have to pay for the appraisal? Even if you don't purchase the house? Yes, you do. If you pay for an appraisal and it appraises and you do a home inspection and you find out that the property is in terrible condition and you can't get the repairs done and you cancel, did you still pay for the appraisal and the home inspection and you didn't get the house? Absolutely. Again, it's part of the process of purchasing a home. Now, can you try to negotiate with a seller who cancels because of their contingency of finding a replacement property to get some of that paid for? Sure, you can attempt. There is nothing that requires them to do that. Okay? So, if I'm a buyer's agent and I'm representing somebody purchasing a home that is contingent on the seller finding a replacement property, that's part of the conversation I'm going to have when we submit. Hey, by the way, you're going to have to do your appraisal and your inspection, and they may not be able to find a replacement property, and it's going to cost you some money to do that. You have to be honest with them. The problem is where we run into a problem with buyers is we don't tell them the truth. So when they end up having to spend the money and they don't get the house, they're like, well, you never told me. And that's when they want their money back, or that's when they want things paid for. And then you as buyer's agent, well, I'll pay for your home inspection next time, or I'll pay for your appraisal on the next one, but we're not going to get the money back. Right? So it's our fault when things like that happen because it's not part of our consultation with our buyers. Right? So again, it's better for you as seller, 100%, that the contingencies, the time periods, all remain as they were in the purchase agreement. Okay? Even if you're looking, or if you've already found a property, you got to make sure that they work like that. Now, if you're a listing agent and you've done it backwards and you've already got their offer accepted and now you're trying to sell a house, right? Then you've got to make sure that you counter your time periods for your buyers on your downleg property to make sure that they complete within the time periods that you have remaining on your upleg. Does that make sense? Like, so my contingencies are, hey, I've got 10 days left on my contingency. At the very least, my contingencies on my buyer have to be 10 days. Now, what that does is it makes things very difficult, right? Because it puts a lot of pressure. It puts a lot of pressure on the buyers. So just keep those things in mind, right? When you're dealing with it. And that's why I always say it's more important for us to treat them as a seller, get their home sold, get them in escrow, have control on what's happening on our downleg with our buyers before we're writing offers, so that we don't have that pressure of, oh man, we really got to find a buyer. We really got to find a buyer, right? Because I've already got an escrow and you don't want to lose it. Okay. Questions about that part? Any questions about the time periods? No? Okay. The buyer's deposit is the same thing. If we don't check this box as specified in the purchase agreement, then the buyer's deposit is not going to be put into escrow until after we remove the contingency. So as seller, I always want that in there. And look, as a buyer's agent, again, you want the deposit in there. They don't have the right to keep your deposit if they cancel because of their contingency. But you also want to make sure that you're showing commitment to the purchase. Remember, there is a lack of inventory. We talked about this when we were writing offers for the last 3 weeks. We want to make our offer as strong as possible. If I am on a contingent offer, I'm a buyer and I'm agreeing to the terms of theirs, not trying to fight them on it, I have a better chance of getting my offer accepted. It's just I have to be honest with my buyers on what it could cost them and ultimately not have the escrow close. Okay. But remember, there's always negotiation of extensions and things like that. It's not always going to just be dead because we get to day 30 and they haven't found a house, or we get to day 17 and they haven't found a house. We can negotiate things. But if I'm listing agent, I want to make sure these two boxes are checked on every offer I get when I counter and send an SPRP. Okay. Now, the other question I get from agents is, well, how much time do I put on the escrow when I write an offer on a contingent house? the same amount of escrow period as you would put on anything else, because obviously we're going to have to extend it. So guessing on whether it's going to be a 60, a 90, or a 20-day, it doesn't matter. 30-day escrow, just put it in as right as a 30-day escrow, because what we're going to put here is close of escrow. Parties agree that seller may extend the close of escrow date for the sale of seller's property for a maximum of, boom. And we're going to put in there 30 days by providing buyer with written notice at the time seller removes the finding replacement contingency specified in 1A. So what that's saying is that we have a 30-day escrow, but when I remove my contingency of finding a replacement property, I'm also going to send you an extension of time addendum for the close of escrow, which means from the day I remove my contingency, now we have 30 days to close escrow. So don't worry about what the escrow period says in the purchase agreement. As long as we do this properly, that's what's going to dictate when we close escrow. Okay? Question. Any questions? Anybody unclear up to this point on how we're using this form to protect our sellers and control the terms of a purchase agreement on our down leg? Okay. Other terms, that could just be anything that you need to write in there. I don't know exactly what we would put in there. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that we would put for other terms, but anything that may affect this form, the contingency of finding a replacement property, that's what we would put here. Cancellation of replacement property. If seller's replacement property is in or enters escrow, or there is another agreement and either party to that escrow or agreement gives the other a notice of cancellation, seller within 2 days thereafter shall deliver to buyer written notice of the cancellation. So if we go into escrow on a replacement property and that replacement property cancels, I have to give them 2 days. Within 2 days, I have to give them proof of that cancellation. Okay. Now remember, I have a contingency of close, right? Close of replacement property. That's why I have that in there. So if it does cancel, I'm not forced to continue selling the house to the down leg if we don't want to, if they don't want to stay in escrow and extend and do all those things to help us find another, to allow us to find another property. If they don't want to do that, they can't force us to sell because of our removal of the contingency of finding a replacement property, because I have the contingency of close. I can't close because it was canceled. Okay. The removal of the contingencies, just like all contingencies in the purchase agreement, it says that if I haven't removed them in writing, they are still in effect. It works both ways for buyer and seller. So if the seller hasn't removed his contingency of finding a replacement property and it's day 35, he still has the contingency of selling his replacement or finding a replacement property. Okay. Until they're removed in writing. Let's see, Melvin, can the listing agent counter on that? You know what? I don't know what you're referring to, which part of the counter. So that was 2 minutes ago. So I'm assuming you're talking about the close of escrow, the extension. Which part? The extension. Let's do this. Hold on a second. Melvin, do you have a microphone that you could speak in? I just asked you to unmute. That way you can explain your question a little bit better. Okay. Look, anything is negotiable. So yes, if, for example, I'm a buyer's agent and I get from a seller an SPRP and a counter and I don't like the terms of the SPRP, I could attempt to send a buyer's counter and my own SPRP with the terms that I felt were more favorable. I could request that. Does the listing agent have to accept it? Absolutely not. But yeah, everything's negotiable, and I can make requests and counter offers if I feel like they're the terms are not beneficial to my buyer, and I want to try to help them with that. Yeah, I can make requests. Absolutely, you can do that in a counter. Okay, so removal of contingencies. Remember, just like all contingencies, they stay in effect even if we're past the days until they're removed in writing. Buyer's right to cancel. Buyer may cancel the agreement in writing as follows. After first giving seller an NSP, notice the seller to perform. If seller fails to remove the finding or replacement property contingency. After first giving seller an NSP, if seller fails to give proof of replacement property as specified in 1A, which is copy of the purchase agreement, copy of the escrow number, that kind of stuff. If paragraph 1C is checked, after first giving seller an NSP, if seller fails to remove the closing on replacement property contingency. Everything is the notice to perform. If they don't remove those, the buyer has the right to cancel. If seller gives notice to buyer of either party's cancellation of the agreement of the replacement property. So in that 2-day period where I say, oh, we got cancellation notice from the seller, I have to give it to them, the buyer has the right to cancel. Can't keep their deposit. If seller is unable to meet the obligation for other timeframes in the agreement, such as for close of escrow, buyer may cancel as permitted in the agreement, even if the contingency is not removed, right? So if we get past a specific close date or something else, whatever the agreement says, which means like they're talking about seller providing documents, reports, disclosures, that kind of stuff. They're talking about the stuff that's in the agreement that also, if the seller doesn't live up to their terms and they get a notice to perform, okay? If paragraph 1C is checked, seller is unable to close escrow on a replacement property according to that contract. That's the, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over the buyer's right to cancel. So this is seller's right to cancel. Seller may cancel the agreement in writing as follows. If prior to seller's removal of the final replacement property contingency, seller is unable to enter into a contract to acquire a replacement property, that's it. They get to cancel. Or if they can't close, if they have that contingency, that's it. Buyer and seller sign this and they agree, and we're off and running. Okay, so that's the SPRP, has to be incorporated into your counteroffers if you're not receiving it with the purchase agreement, which 99% of the time you're not going to be. So you've got to make sure as seller that you're doing that. Okay, now when we write an offer for that seller, we've now done that. We've accepted an offer. We've put those terms in. Now we're going to start looking for the upleg. This is the form that we're going to incorporate into our purchase agreements when we write offers. We're going to be sending this with our offer. Okay, always. Again, addendum to the purchase agreement. It's an addendum. Let's say it's the same date, whatever. The seller is not obviously going to be Bill Jones because it's a new seller. We don't know the seller's name, but let's say John Smith is the buyer, right? Okay. Buyer's property contingency. This agreement is contingent upon buyer entering into a contract for the sale of and closing escrow on buyer's property. Now, the default is we're doing this the wrong way. So if you are writing your offers prior to accepting one, you're not going to check any boxes. You're just going to leave it as 1A as your default for sending this with your offer. If that's how you wrote it prior to selling their down leg, you're going to leave it alone. You're not going to check any boxes. Now, if you've already accepted an offer, then you're only going to check 1C because it's only contingent on you closing the escrow on your down leg. I don't see anywhere where it would be only this one, where it's only contingent on me finding somebody to buy it, and after that, we're good. I don't know why anybody would check that, but there you go. This would be if you haven't sold the house yet, you haven't found a buyer, you haven't entered escrow, you don't have that contingent down leg, you would leave it alone. If you've already done that, then all you're doing is going to check this box off. Then you're going to put the escrow company. We'll just say it's Pacific Escrow for now, right? We'll just say it's Pacific Escrow on this. Our escrow number is, I don't know, whatever the numbers are. That's the escrow number. And you have a copy of the contract for sale of buyer's property and the contact information and escrow number for that sale. Escrow evidence is attached. That's the default. If you have all that stuff, just send it with your offer. If you don't, then you got to check this off so you can do it. Okay. Now, obviously, if we don't check this box, we don't have this info. But we're going to want to send everything with our offer because that's going to make our offer look stronger. Again, remember, it's already difficult out there, so I'm going to make my offer look stronger. I'm going to say, look, we've already sold it. We've checked off the box. That's only the close of escrow is our only contingency on this purchase. Here is our escrow information. Here is a copy of our contract. Here's everything. Here you go. Again, it's going to help us have a stronger offer. We send it with the offer. And I think what happens is most people don't send that stuff. They don't read it. They just say, oh, here's the escrow number, here's the escrow company. And they don't send the purchase agreement. They don't send the information. They don't do it. So you got to do that. Okay? The contract and the contact information for escrow. I'm going to send you a contract of our purchase, of our sale, of our down leg, and the contact information from our escrow officer. Please call them and get all of the information you want. They have the right to do that, okay? And I don't think most agents do that, because I've seen it before in offers where they just send the COP, they put that information in, but they don't. They don't provide it. And because we as listing agents don't pay attention and ask for it, we don't get it either, okay? So please make sure you're doing that. Okay. Number 2, buyer entering into contract for sale of buyer's property. If 1A or 1B applies, right? So let's say that we left it as the default where we have to sell it and close. You have 17 days after acceptance to enter into a contract for the sale of buyer's property. Just like on the up leg, you have 17 days to find a replacement. On your down leg, you have 17 days to sell it if you haven't done that yet. Okay? By the earlier of the time specified in 2A or within 2 days after buyer entering into contract for the sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver escrow evidence. So again, if I've written my offer prior to selling my down leg, once I do say, hey, it's day 16, we've sold it, we've accepted an offer, here's all the information, I have to send with them a copy of the contract, the escrow number, the escrow company, and the contact information for the escrow officer with my offer. Okay, with my removal of my contingency of entering into a contract. Okay. Listing and MLS status of buyer's property if 1A or 1B applies. So if I'm contingent on selling the property, I haven't done it yet, then I have to put this escrow information in there. If I don't need that, if I'm only doing this section, I don't have to put all the MLS info in there. So you can bypass that. Okay. But this is saying, hey, look, at least I've signed a listing agreement, right? I've already signed a listing agreement, and here's it, this is who it's listed with. And then I have a copy of the MLS listing. I have to send that within 1 day after acceptance. Okay. So if I haven't already sold it, remember, this is if 1A or B applies. 1A is entering into a contract and closing escrow on. 1B is only entering into a contract. So if either of those apply, then I have to provide this information. Okay? If not, I can skip it altogether, go down to 4, close of escrow of buyer's property. Buyer has until the following time to close escrow on the sale of buyer's property. The scheduled close of escrow of seller's property, or if checked no later than 5 days prior to scheduled close of escrow of seller's property. So what they're saying is, if we write an offer that's a 30-day escrow, my time period by default is I have to close escrow on my sale of my down leg at least by the time we close escrow, the date of the close of escrow of the up leg. Okay? Now, if I'm a listing agent, I don't want that. And again, we're talking about strength of offer, right? When we were talking about writing offers as buyer's agents, I'm going to check this box. No later than 5 days prior to our scheduled close of escrow. Because I should be closed prior to. Because I have to transfer funds. I have to put money in. I have to sign loan docs. We have to do all that stuff. So I think it's better for me as buyer's agent. It makes it look stronger that we have this box checked off. For a listing agent, I'm going to want to see that. I don't want to wait until our close of escrow date. Okay? Any questions about so far? I just want to pause as we go through this. Any questions up to this point on what we've discussed? The thing is, of the 50 of you that are on here, I don't believe you that you don't have any questions. I promise you, whatever question you have, there is multiple people that have the same question on here, so please don't worry about looking bad by asking a question. Because I know what's going to happen. As soon as we're done with the class today, I'm going to get a phone call, or someone's going to walk up to my desk and they're going to be like, hey, you know about this part? So please, please, please it's the benefit of everybody. If you have a question, ask it. And look at, there's Lulu. Go ahead, Lulu.
Kyle, again, go over number 4. So
Okay.
if what I understand, you're saying, of course, we have to close the down leg before we go into the up leg. Is that what it says there?
Well, no,
5
no.
days.
Well, yeah. What it's saying is this: is it's saying that the buyer has to close their down leg escrow no later than the close date that we've agreed upon on this up leg purchase. That's the default, right? So let's say that we get our offer accepted today. So our 30-day escrow is, July 14th, 15th, whatever, 13th. That's when we're supposed to close. And I'm in escrow on my down leg as a buyer, right? Selling my house.
Mhm.
My down leg escrow has to close no later than July 14th. If it does go past that, then the seller on this property would be able to cancel on me, right? Because I'm not doing it. If I were a listing agent, what I would say is I don't want to wait to our close date. I want to at least have some kind of a cushion. So I'm going to request that no later than 5 days prior, right? Like when we do our walkthroughs, right? As a buyer, we do it 5 days prior to close. I want your down leg escrow to close 5 days prior than our scheduled close of escrow on this up leg purchase. Does that make sense?
I get it. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, that's what that's talking about. And I think it makes sense. That's fair. There should be no reason why we can't close 5 days earlier. But if stuff starts to come up, we can negotiate. We can do extensions here and there and make some changes. Okay? So I hope that clarified it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Jesus, go ahead.
Lily beat me to the Lulu beat me to the punch. I was just to yes. So now it's definitely more clear, but just to clarify it. Therefore, you are saying as a selling agent that I'm writing the offer and I put the 5 days. Now the listing agent is gonna say, like you say, to have more strength in the offer. The
No.
listing agent will say, okay, yeah, you're gonna close 5 days before us, so we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
That's what you meant.
I mean,
Totally.
yes, yeah,
I
yeah.
get it. Thank you.
That's my that's my opinion. I believe
Like,
that
you
it
know your
makes your
stuff.
I believe it makes your offer stronger because it takes
Yes.
away that idea of, hey, look, we're going to close on the same day. Jose put this form is called COP. The last one is called the SPRP when you're looking for it in zip forms. So seller's purchase of replacement property, SPRP, if anybody missed that one. Okay. All right. So that's close of escrow. The status of the sale of buyer's property. Okay. So remember on the SPRP, it said if the up leg cancels or is there's a threat of cancellation, I have to tell the buyer. Well, here, this is the same thing. Buyer agrees to keep seller informed about the status of the transaction for sale of buyer's property, including any changes, modifications, addenda, amendments to the terms of the accepted offer, or delays to or removals of contingencies. So I've got to keep the listing agent updated, which means if I now gave you proof that we've got an offer accepted. I gave you a copy of the contract. If for some reason we do an amendment that says, oh, we're reducing the price or we're giving a credit, technically I have to give that to the listing agent on the up leg. Any of the terms. Now, if there's an extension of time, I've got to tell them, hey, they asked for an extension of their contingencies. We accepted it. I've got to tell the seller that. Okay? I've got within 2 days after seller's written request, but no earlier than the applicable time to remove contingencies in the contract for sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver to seller evidence of the removal of those identified contingencies. So what that's saying is on my down leg, right? If it's time for me to remove the contingencies and the seller sends me a notice basically of saying, hey, listen, you've got 2 days to get your contingencies removed by your buyer on your down leg. If they don't, the seller shall have the right to cancel. Okay? So we've got to keep them informed. I think that one of the problems is as listing agent, We don't even do this stuff when we're accepting a contingent purchase, right? We don't go through and say, hey, listen, what's going on with your offer? Where are you? Hey, listen, it's time for you guys to remove contingent. Like, I would guess there's a ton of agents out there that don't even have a copy of the purchase agreement. They don't know. Hey, there's listing agents that don't know when their contingencies are due on their own sales, and now they got to keep up with the contingencies on a down leg. It doesn't happen, but it could. And if we're dealing with people who understand how the contract works and are on top of their timelines, and we're not doing the things that we're supposed to, we could get ourselves in a position where we're losing out on the home that our sellers wanted. And now not only do we lose a sale, but we lose a listing, right, on a down leg. Okay. Angel, go ahead.
What would be the benefit of notifying the listing agent of any changes on my side? Let's say a credit.
I mean, there is no benefit. I mean, it's not a benefit. It's just that they are now a party to your transaction. So they need to be informed on what's happening. It's not a benefit or it's not a detriment. It's not either. It is just the rules of this agreement say, I've got to, any changes to that original agreement that I provided you, I've got to let you know what those changes are.
Regardless of what they are, whether it be a credit to the buyer, credit for repairs, credit for closing costs, any changes, anything.
Yeah, yes, because think about this. Okay, so if I'm accepting your offer, right, it's because you sent me your escrow net sheet saying this is how much you're netting, right? And if you're taking everything that you're netting from the sale of your house and you're giving it to my seller as your down payment, right? And now you have to now pay a $5,000 credit, or you have to reduce the sales price by $5,000. What just happened to that net that you showed me as the funds that you were using to purchase my house?
Okay. Yeah, it just changed.
Yeah. So we live in this world of like, well, it's the contingent, it doesn't matter, but those things make sense. And as a listing agent, you'd want to know that, like, wait a minute, we accepted your offer based on the terms of your giving us this money. Now it's not that
provided. Yeah.
Right. Or we accepted it based on these are the time periods you told us these things were going to happen. Now they're not. And I think it's important that these things get shared.
Right. I see the point. I see the importance.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Hi.
You're welcome. Okay. So that's the status stuff. The cancellation. The cancellation of buyer's property. If buyer's property is in or enters escrow, and either party to that escrow gives the other a notice of cancellation of contract, buyer within 2 days thereafter shall deliver to seller written notice of that cancellation. You can't hide it from them. I've had so many conversations with agents where they're just like, I canceled, but I have another one, and I'm going to tell them it canceled when I get this other offer accepted, thinking that makes it okay that they could just continue running with this up-leg escrow. Doesn't work like that, and we're going to get to that point in a minute. So you got 2 days. If someone sends you a cancellation on the buyer side, or if you cancel on a buyer because they're not performing, you've got 2 days to tell your seller the listing agent on your up-leg, the seller on your up-leg, hey, this deal canceled. You got 2 days to do it, okay? Backup offers. The seller has the right to require buyer to remove contingencies or cancel. After acceptance, seller shall have the right to continue to offer seller's property for sale for backup offers. The parties acknowledge that brokers shall not violate MLS rules requiring accurate property status reporting, which means it has to go on the MLS as active under contract, right? But they can get backup offers. Unless paragraph 7C3 is selected, and we'll get to that in a second, if seller accepts a written backup offer and provides buyer a copy of the signed accepted backup offer within the time specified in paragraph 7C1, we're going to get to that, or seller seller shall have the right to give written notice to buyer to, in writing, remove this contingency, remove the loan contingency, if any, and provide verification of sufficient funds to close escrow without the sale of buyer's property. Seller may use the bottom of page 2 of this form to comply with the written notice requirements of this paragraph. If buyer fails to complete these actions within 2 days after delivery of such notice, seller may then immediately cancel the agreement in writing. So what they're saying is I've accepted your offer, but I have the right to offer the property to market the property for backup offers and to find an offer maybe that isn't contingent or is better than your contingent offer. Now, the default is immediate right to notify. So it means like if I get your offer today and on Saturday I get an offer that is either non-contingent or better than your offer and I want to take it, I can give you that notice to perform, the 2 days, to remove your contingency of selling your property, remove your loan contingency if you have that, and show me proof of funds to buy this house. If you can't do that, then I get to cancel and move on. That's the default. Now, when we write the offer, we're going to ask for this delayed right to notify. I don't have a problem with that. So what they're going to say is for at least 17 days after acceptance, which should match at least my contingency periods or exceed them a little bit, they can continue to market the property for backup offers. And if they get one and accept one, they can't give me that notice to remove my contingencies for 17 days. Once 17 days comes, they can give me that notice. And if I can't do what they're asking, then they can cancel and move on with their backup offer. The last one is 7C3, which is no right to notify. Seller shall not have a right to notify. If you want to ask for that, go for it. But again, we're talking about strength of offer. That's probably going to weaken your offer. Okay? We're going to power through and finish this today. The removal of contingencies. This contingent. Okay, well, let me ask about that. Okay, paragraph 7. Questions. Are you guys clear on that? So they get to market for backup offers. If we don't address that in the COP, they can cancel on us at any time, right? After giving that 2-day notice, once they receive a backup offer and show us proof. If we have 7C2 checked, they have to wait 17 days before they can do that. If 7C3 is checked, they can't ever do that. We just have to live by the contingencies that we've already agreed on. It's pretty straightforward. Yes, Angel, go ahead.
Yeah, Kyle, it looks like if we check 7C 2 delayed right to buyer, that would weaken our offer. Is that correct?
Well, it obviously isn't as strong as if you go ahead, offer it, and we're going to go. But you know, if they get any backup offer, then they could cancel on you. At least giving them the 17 days. And I think most agents look at it and go, okay, 17 days I'm good with, especially if you're already in escrow, right? If you're already in escrow, the chance that they're already giving you other contingencies, I think that they're probably open to the 17. Now, if you're not in escrow, if you're writing this offer prior to selling the property, if I'm listing agent, I'm not going to give you the delayed time. I'm going to want to keep it that way.
Makes sense.
Right? And at least that way you know that you're not in escrow yet. If they do that, okay, well, it doesn't affect my down leg yet. I can still continue to market my property and find a buyer if they cancel on me. I mean, I think that some of these things are determined on the other terms above.
Right. Per case.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kyle.
You're welcome. And Jesus, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Once again, you clarify it. So it really depends if we are in escrow or not, because that will make a whole difference on the check-in.
Yeah, and I mean, look, even as a buyer's agent, if I'm on the buyer's side, right, and if I'm really deep into, I'm super far along on my down leg, right? If I'm super far along, like they've already removed their contingent, you know, because sometimes it gets hard to find the replacement property. So I've done some extensions with my buyer on the down leg. If my down leg's already removed their contingencies, they've already got loan approval, they're just waiting on me to order docs, then I might be fine. Immediate right to notify, go for it. Because I feel like, hey, look, we're going to close here. Even if I have to close and rent back just so I can remove my contingencies and put my money in. Right? I just think that, but if I'm in escrow, listing agents are probably more likely to say, hey, I'm good with the 17 days. Right. If I'm not, they're going to be like, I don't want to wait around for you forever, so I want to be able to find another offer if I have to.
Right. Leave the door open.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's move on, right? Contingencies. The contingency can only be removed in writing, just like any other contingency, right? Everything has to go with a notice to perform if they don't remove that contingency. So here's the seller's right to cancel. After first giving buyer written notice to buyer notice to remove buyer contingencies and provide proof of funds below if buyer fails to take all actions specified in paragraph 7B. We've already talked about that. That was the one we just talked about. After first giving buyer an NBP, if buyer fails to enter into a contract for the sale of buyer's property in the time specified in paragraph 2A, right? The 17 days, whatever it was in the beginning. After first giving buyer an NBP, if buyer fails to close escrow for the sale of buyer's property. After first giving buyer an NBP, if buyer fails to deliver escrow evidence within the time specified. So everything is just like all the other contingencies. I got to give a notice to perform. If they don't do it, I have the right to cancel. If, like any other contingency, if we don't remove it in writing, it still continues on. Here's the buyer's right to cancel. Buyer may cancel the agreement in writing if prior to buyer's removal of buyer's property contingency specified in paragraph 1A, B, or C, as applicable. If 1A or 1B applies, buyer is unable to enter into a contract of buyer's property within the time specified in 2A. Or if 1A or 1C applies, either party for buyer's property gives notice to the other to cancel the contract for purchase of buyer's property. Or C, if 1A or 1C applies, buyer is unable to close escrow on buyer's property within the time specified in paragraph 4A. Just like any other contingency, if I can't do it by the time that we agreed upon, I cancel. Okay? Time for performance of contract obligations and delivery of deposit. So remember, what it was on the SPRP was the default was after the contingency removal. It's the opposite here. Time periods in the agreement for inspections, contingencies, covenants, close of escrow, and other obligations, excluding those in this addendum, shall begin as specified in the agreement. If we check the box, they begin the day after we deliver the escrow evidence for the buyer's property and the election to start the time periods. Right? It changes. So again, strength of offer wise, I'm probably going to want to leave it on the default. If I'm the listing agent and anything is checked other than the default, I'm probably going to counter and put a new COP in. And it's the same thing for the deposit. I want the deposit in right away. Okay. All right. That is the contingent sale forms. One other thing that I want to stress to you guys about contingent sales, if I'm a buyer and I'm writing an offer on a sale that is contingent, right? They've already told me, then my offer is going to have in there a minimum of 7 days for the seller to remain in possession after the close of escrow, because it's going to take time for the seller to close escrow on their up leg, get moved in there. I'm going to do a minimum 7 days, and I'm going to make sure that my buyer understands that they're not getting their home right away. It's not going to happen. On any seller occupied, it should be a minimum of 3 anyway, but with an up leg, minimum of 7, I suggest 10. If I'm a listing agent, I'm going to counter back that my seller remains in possession for at least 10 days after close of escrow if I have an up leg. Okay. And for any listing agent that's listening, if you have a seller in possession, please counter that your seller is going to remain in possession for at least 3 days after close of escrow, because we all know what's going to happen. Okay. It should only be delivered possession on the date of close of escrow if that property is vacant, period, end of story. Bertha, you had a question. Go ahead.
So if I'm going to stay 10 days, to close, and obviously the buyer they ask, oh, so I'm going to be paying those 10 days?
No, you're not going to pay for those 10 days, because that's the market we're in right now, that you have the ability to do that. And so we're going to incorporate the SIP form, which is a seller's license to remain in possession. And you're going to put in there, and in your counter, you're going to stay. If I'm listing agent, I'm going to counter the buyer's agent. I'm going to say, buyer agrees to allow seller to remain in possession for 10 days after close of escrow at zero cost to seller. Form SIP to be incorporated in this agreement. Form provided to be signed and returned with this counter offer. Now, I know you're not taking that note. I have those counters already written. If you guys need them, send me an email. But yes, I'm going to ask for that for free. It's in this market, it is fair. With inventory at less than 2 months, it is me as listing agent that gets to dictate the terms of my offer, period. End of story. Now, it may change when it changes to a buyer's market, and whenever it does, because it will, and whenever it does, it's probably going to change. It'll be like, hey, we'll get out 10 days before close of escrow as seller, right? It's going to change. It's going to change. But as of right now, no, it's going to be at zero cost. Now, what I would incorporate in there is a per diem for any time they remain past that contractual agreement, just so that we could commit to say, hey, look, if for some reason it extends, we're not monsters. You get 10 days for free, and then we're going to pay you $100 a day if it goes past that. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jesus.
Really quick, Berta. That's why it's important for you to know when you're going to close. So maybe you can say, don't worry, you have a month and a half for the next payments on 10 days. It's really not going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And also, right now, some buyers are paying $6,000, $7,000 a month. I think $100 per diem, it doesn't cut it. It should be like 150 to 200. Depends what the payment will be, don't you think?
Yeah, but I mean, that's for the buyer's agent to negotiate. I'm telling you as listing agent, this is what you're going to get.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's up to you as buyer's agent. It's up to you to negotiate. Say, hey, listen, okay, we're good with 10 days for free, or we'll do this. We'll give you an extra 5. We'll give you 15 for free. But if you stay past that, then you're going to pay us, $250 or $300 a day. That's fine. Everything is negotiable. And it's funny is I talked to an agent that's super part-time yesterday, and she was calling me about some advice on a counteroffer that she got. And she had a really long conversation with the listing agent. They were able to kind of clarify some things, negotiate some stuff, rewrite counteroffers, all because she took the time to speak to the listing agent. The problem for us as agents is, number one, as listing agent, whatever reason, we're too good to take the buyer's agent's call. And as buyer's agents, we're afraid to make the phone call. We'd rather just send stuff. Like, no, just take it and see what happens. Talk to people. It's very easy. It's very easy to just have a conversation and be like, look, we both want the exact same thing. We both want to close this escrow. I want my buyer in that house. You want your seller out of that house. We're on the same team. Let's have a conversation. Let's make this all work, and let's make it work for everybody. But instead, we don't do that. We just, here's a piece of paper, and that we let that paper explain itself. That's not the right way to do things, guys. We got to be more communicative with other people. Let's see. I got another thing in the chat, and then we're gonna go. Is the 7-day seller in possession something we can advertise in the MLS listing info for potential buyers? Sure, but I mean, what I would do is put it not for the buyers, but I would put it so that for the agent remarks that, hey, sellers are gonna need 7, 10, 15 days after close of escrow. Let them know. Sure, absolutely, but put it in the private remarks, not in the public. Okay. All right. Any other questions before I let you guys go? No. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. You guys have, Angel has one more thing before we go.
No, it's not a question. I just wanted to thank you, Kyle, for that.
Oh, thank you, Angel. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very, very informative.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, so thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. Be productive, be safe, and I will talk to you again soon.